also want to take a look at the Mavericks. Obviously, their situation is interesting here. So this is the Dallas Mavericks cap sheet now, and we can see that AD and Kyrie are the big earners, obviously, 43, 41 million respectively. And then they also have a few mid-tier salaries with Klay Thompson, PJ Washington, Gafford, Najee Marshall, Caleb Martin, who they just traded for today, actually, is now on this cap sheet. So that kind of is interesting to look at as well. So their situation here is a little bit different than the Lakers. They have a little bit less salary, so they're hard capped at the first apron here. And they are almost 11 million under the second apron. So they don't face as many restrictions in terms of building their team because they're so low. And with the Mavericks here, they were actually 5 million over the luxury tax before this trade. And they reduced their salary here. So when it comes to the luxury tax, they're actually a little bit below that. I think Bobby Marks reported that they're kind of like 628K under the luxury tax. So the Mavericks do have more flexibility. I want to point that out as well. And they can also go various different directions. We'll talk about this here in a little bit, but I mean, they have a lot of front court depth here with a lot of these players and some decent backcourt presence as well. But Kyrie's going to be leading the charge there. Same thing here, man. I mean, we talked about LeBron. Kyrie has a player option for next year. So theoretically, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but theoretically, he could opt out of that and explore opportunities elsewhere. I mean, I'd be crazy if that happens because I don't see where he want to go after this, but I do want to point that out as well because he does have a player option. So, any thoughts here on the Maverick side of things when you look at some of their contracts?
Yeah, I mean, you broke it down as always eloquently, but like they're in an interesting situation because you do have a lot of lower tier contracts toward the bottom. But like some of those guys, I mean, you hope that Prosper is somebody that you can kind of look at. Jaden Hardy's there. Dwight Powell's a low one, but Derek Lively's going to be big, right? You just traded for Caleb Martin. I do like the contract. I think obviously there's a lot more to unpack between that Caleb Martin, Quentin Grimes trade that we can kind of get into. But, for whatever reason, we know that the Mavs had made an offer to Grimes, in the summer that didn't go through. So maybe they just kind of valued that long-term security at a pretty decent contract for Caleb Martin at a pretty decent number. But again, you have a similar type of good, solid, medium contracts. You do have your bigger ones at the top, of course, which command the most, and that's your quote unquote core, right? I would say those top four players, at least as currently constructed, Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving, who aren't going anywhere, you would imagine, but make the most. And then Klay Thompson's at a really good number, but he's probably obviously going to stay. And PJ Washington, who I think, considering how he's been for Dallas, is probably underpaid just at that, if only by a couple mil. So I like it. I think, again, they're in a similar area. It's kind of odd thing about, except that it seems like they're mostly cementing whatever their team's going to be, whereas the Lakers are a lot more fluid with their roster construction at this point in time.
For sure. Yeah, and one other thing I want to point out with the Mavericks here, they got to give some props to AD here. They got to thank him because AD actually had a trade bonus that he was eligible for in this trade that he declined. He waived it, so it opened up a little bit more space for the Mavericks. And he was quoted just the other day saying that, hey, I made this decision because I wanted to give the team more flexibility in order to make moves, help us win, be more competitive. So it kind of shows that AD is like really serious about winning with this team. He's committed to bringing wins here, making a deep playoff run, making all this happen. It seems like he's pretty hyped about this. And, I know it's not easy leaving LeBron in LA, but I mean, it's not like he's going to the Wizards or something here. He's going to a solid team that still has a lot of talent, and they're coming off a finals appearance, so there are no pushovers. But we're going to have to monitor the situation here with their salaries. But because there are some decisions to be made, and we'll see what Kyrie does. That's the elephant in the room. And then a couple other guys are going to be unrestricted, Dinwiddie and Exum, two guys that they're going to rely on quite a bit here now that Luka's gone. That's going to change things up for sure. So, just kind of wanted to point all that out for next season. As it stands, it looks like they're a little bit over the tax. They do have a lot of space under the second apron. It kind of just depends on like what Kyrie does. Is going to determine how much space they have, but they could have a decent amount depending on what he does and how they go forward. But AD's contract does take a big jump here. I want to point that out as well. Goes from 43 to 54 and then 57 in 2 years before a player option is 62. So I mean, AD he's earning. He's making
that money.
Absolutely, man. So yeah, this is something to monitor for sure.